Hello and welcome to Varner-Hogg Plantation, located in Brazoria County near West Columbia. Here, we remember, reflect on, and recognize for its complexity the history of all those who have inhabited and have shaped our current landscape.
This place makes me feel a bunch of different emotions. The story has pretty much always been focused solely on the white owner experience, and now we're trying to just expand that narrative to include the minority groups that were out here who actually created all of the wealth for the plantations, mainly just focusing on the Hogg era, where they'll just X out the whole plantation life in general and just talk about the Hogg era. And even with the Karankawa indigenous tribes, a lot of people don't know that the Karankawas were even out here or that they held this land before Stephen F. Austin's original 300s.
This perfect union that America talks about, we were not perfect in 1776, we were not perfect in 1528, which I have this hat on, about the first enslaved African to arrive in the Texas territories, Este and Vinico in 1528. We were not perfect back then, but we're moving, hopefully, to a more perfect union.
When I first got here, it's what I call hoop skirts and happiness. It was this glorified part of our history with little regard as to how all that took place and how this big house came to be and who built this big house and who built the wealth in this area.
In the past, there have been pieces of the story that have been highlighted that maybe don't affect everybody in the community, and I think this place did affect everybody in the community, so we're here to expand the narrative and to make sure that the entire story is told based on our archival record and the facts that we have.
The agency's tagline is real places telling real stories, and I honestly believe that, but it's also real places telling all of the story, and that's what we're trying to do, is just to be able to make sure that this narrative is complete.
By knowing the full story, you can honor the people that were here before you. You know, I understand how it seems like a very celebratory place, but you can't forget the darker times that happened before.
The story has always been focused on the white owner experience, so we all know about Ima Hogg, the Hogg family, and what they did for Texas. So I feel like it's time to start learning about what the enslaved population did for Texas as well, too.
VHP began as a small agricultural site, commissioned to Martin Varner through the Austin Land Grant in 1824. 10 enslaved individuals arrived with Varner. These individuals carried out the labor required to maintain the farm and the livestock.
Stephen F. Austin's original 300 started out here. Martin Varner was the first owner of this land. In 1834, he sold the land to the Patton families, which turned this place into a sugar plantation. It was unique because they were one of the only slaveholders who held more than 100 people in bondage during the times of the antebellum period.
The new plantation depended heavily on the 40 to 60 enslaved individuals who were brought to the land with Patton. Under a brutal institution, these individuals were forced to build the plantation house, sugar mill, smokehouse, and their own living quarters. Under the abolition of slavery in 1865, the plantation was sold by Patton in 1869 and used for comic leasing and sharecropping programs. These labor systems only echoed the oppressions of slave labor.
After emancipation, the Texas Land Company took over the site. They turned to convict leasing, which was pretty much worse than slavery. When you were enslaved, it was a liability to the slave owner to keep you alive, to keep you healthy, because you were an investment. But when convict leasing happened, you could just go out into the public, arrest anybody you seen fit, and turn them into a legal slave to the state once again. Texas was pretty much the last frontier of enslavement in the antebellum period. Governor Hogg owned this land from 1901 until his death. He expressed to his children that he believed there was oil under the land, so to keep the land. And 15 years after he passed away, his kids struck oil, and that's how they received this large fortune that they had, until today's time.
VHP has now been passed under the ownership of the Texas Historical Commission.
When I started talking to some leadership in our communities. They were wondering why I was focusing on the word racism, and I was focusing on the word underrepresented or marginalized, and they didn't understand how that had anything to do with these two sites, and it's where it began. We are the root of all of this. If we don't start at the beginning, how do we ever plan on, progressing into the future? It's just, we've got to start at the bottom and start working our way up and educating people on how this all came to be. The more educated they are, the better they understand it, the more they're willing to communicate about it.
A couple of times when I've gone on plantations in Louisiana, and a Delphin would say, and the plantation owner built, and I stopped her and I said, who built the plantation? She said, the plantation owner. I said, well, what about the enslaved people? What did they do? And so she just kind of stopped and she said, well, you're correct. And so again, it's been so much focus on the plantation owner when actually the enslaved ran the plantation. They cleared the land, chopped the wood, built the plantation, grew the products, cooked the food. I mean, the whole idea of the craftsmen on the plantation, and to draw in people, you just have to focus on the entire culture of the plantation. It has to be inclusive. It has to include everybody.
So right there tells me that we are skipping a part of history in order to be comfortable. And it's not necessarily about being comfortable. It's about getting out of your comfort zone and having those conversations.
These are part of our history, and people are, I think, working towards still including that more in what we do, and definitely starting to embrace those stories a little more than they had.
Each day we remember, we renew, and get back to our roots of telling and remembering the stories. And when you're gathered around with seniors, that's where you get your information and your wisdom and things that we can propagate in the world. And we have gotten away from that, and we owe that to our ancestors. They've done too much, they've come too far.
If you go through our exhibits, you will see that we don't hide anything. We try not to.
They have begun the work of expanding the narrative, and I often use the analogy of a green salad. The stories that we hear often are the lettuce and tomato stories of founders, early settlers, but this history salad includes croutons, bell peppers, bacon bits, olives, hot peppers, and we're just trying to flavor up the history by expanding it and making it more attractive to everyone that visits the site, because when you get one narrative or one version, you don't get the complete story. It's my effort, not only here at this site, but anywhere I talk about history, to make it more flavorful.
If everybody can come and relate to the site for a different reason, I think it makes it a more positive experience. And then learning all of the history, and not just the good parts and not just the bad parts, and just getting the complete story helps people make their own judgments and helps them make their own opinions on things.
Putting the community back into that, or keeping it in the context of the community, going to them and saying, I want to hear what you have to say, it's empowering, because you're giving them a stage to talk about their experience and to say, this is what I've seen, this is what I've witnessed, and this is how it is from my perspective. So that in turn, that teaches me what it's really like here, and at the same time, it makes them comfortable to wanting to come out here, and it makes them more comfortable to wanting to share that information. They're from this area. This is their land. This is their community. They are also masters and professionals, and I have to value that just as I would value that in a professional academic setting or just any professional setting.
This work at the Varner-Hogg Plantation will affect public history because the more data that we gain with the use of archival and oral history information helps us fill in some of the gaps of the story that we have at this plantation. So that includes some obscured or undertold stories that can be illuminated through this work and can really highlight some of the lives and histories of people that might have been forgotten or overlooked at this place.
Everybody needs to research their family history, whether you're on a plantation or not. It's not going to be pretty, but it is what it is. And I think for residents who live in the area who are not familiar with it, that history is their history, whether they want to own it or not. It's everybody's history. Black history is everybody's history.
Through the development of a public archaeology program, we hope to offer the opportunity for local people to engage in archaeology in any way that they want to, from the beginning design of the research project to the end interpretations. And so between the design and the interpretation, there are several tasks that need to be done. And some people might be interested in participating in excavation, and we would welcome them on the site anytime Rice researchers were there excavating to come and participate in moving dirt and collecting materials and observing what objects and patterns in the archaeological record look like as we uncover them each day. From there, the materials that we collect and the information that we record in the field goes into a large laboratory process of curating and recording and processing notes and records and photographs and the material remains that are collected.
I think archaeology here on site is exactly what we need. It's more evidence. We have a pretty good story with our archival records, but with the archaeological artifacts, and especially having visitors come in and see that, it's one thing to tell a story, but when you can pair an item that maybe they could touch, or maybe it's something that they have at their home or they saw at grandma's house, and then to see that and how it would be used here on site, I think is pretty important, and it just is a good visual learn.
And so there's a lot of work to be done, creating and cleaning up data sets, washing and curating artifacts. Even some levels of analysis can be done right in the field as you sort and record the types of objects that are being collected and bag them and label them and get them ready for analysis. And so we would love for local people to come out and participate in this work in any way that they wanted to.
I feel very excited. For Black people in America, a lot of our histories and a lot of things with our culture, like I said, it's visual, but everything is passed down orally, or at least the majority of it. So when things are told orally, sometimes they tend to stay in the state of being intangible. So when you have something that's actually tangible, it makes it a lot more exciting and more relatable. So archaeology plays a very big part in that from my perspective, because it widens your audience and it brings new people. It expands your demographics age-wise, because more people are actually able to come up and touch and understand what's going on.
It is likely, highly likely, that there'll be more opportunities to involve the community later on as we continue to develop our plans and define the questions that we want to ask and how we'll move forward.
There's a Chinese proverb that says, if you want 1 year of prosperity, grow grain. If you want 10 years of prosperity, grow trees. If you want 100 years of prosperity, grow people. So as individuals visit the site, it is my hope that they will grow in knowledge and information to grow them, that they may prosper individually and the community may prosper as a whole. That prosperity does not just mean financial dollars and cents. To grow can grow in better community relationships between the different races, to grow in numbers of people that are involved, because a lot of people don't feel included in the narrative and the story. So we need to grow the participation at the site and attendance to the site. We need to grow with the investment in the site to make it a place that attracts other individuals to come, not only from this immediate community, but the greater Houston and the entire state. It is my hope that this 100 year of prosperity will happen, because as people, they come into the site one way, but they leave better because of the information that is shared.
I'm very excited. I'm already excited to the point we've gotten to, but I'm really excited about the future and what that means.
I think a lot of it has to do with reconciliation and healing. If we can't heal, we can't move forward. We must heal and have them talk about it. And again, nobody's responsible for what their ancestors did. And it's just that period of history that was so ugly. But ignoring it and not talking about it, to me that's not help. So if you can get those people in the same space to talk about it, I think that's part of the healing.
I would like to see Brazoria County as one of the shining stars of being part of a project that brought the African Americans of this region to the forefront. Because the time that I have been here, it has not been honored, it has not been taken, it has not been treasured.
There's another side to all stories. There's other elements and other information in order to tell a complete history of a site, and I think that's really important, and that's the direction we're trying to go, is not to replace that narrative, but just to expand it, to give a better idea of what actually happened.